evening, Damen und Herren, and anyone else who falls into neither or both of those categories, welcome. I'm Layman Pascal, and you're tuned to the Integral Stages author series, sort of coming to you in English and German, because we're talking with Oliver Griebel, who's edited and released an English version of the German anthology about meta-level integrative non-dual theology called Both One and Many, Spiritual Philosophy Beyond Theism, Materialism, and Relativism. Full disclosure, myself and Bruce Alderman, the producer of this series, are featured in this anthology. So if you hear me being a little bit too nice to Oliver, that's probably why. But if you don't hear me being that nice, maybe it's because we didn't get any money for this. Maybe next time. Meanwhile, let's talk about how to figure out whatever God, not God, and maybe God have in common, and see if we can't reconstruct our deconstructed faithfulness in a world where saying it's all either one or many just doesn't quite do it justice. Hi, Oliver. Good to see you.
Hi, Layman.
I thought a good place to start is what you do in the book, which is to take a moment to honor John Heron, who was a contributor and a key contemporary thinker who recently passed away. What do you admire about John and his work?
The terminology of the one many originally came from John Heron. Lately I learned that even the American theologian Catherine Keller had been using the term back in 2001 or 3, I think, calling it the many one in the context of the Elohim. That's the multitude or unity multitude of the divine, right at the beginning of the Genesis, which maybe you heard about it. The Elohim is a plural, and everyone is puzzled about this plural, as has been puzzled for 2,000 years. Catherine Keller has the idea that God is unfolding in a multiplicity or in a multitude of elementals and whatnot, and this is a different context. But John Heron, in fact, invented, I think, the term back in 1992, and I didn't know about it. I only learned about this in 2013, I think, because I myself had used my first sketch of the idea dates back to 2004. And back then I called it the polarity between the all-encompassing and the multitude, which are two sides of one unity and duality. Okay, so I had this idea back in the early 2000s, and only in 2013, a friend of mine, a Facebook friend of mine, a British gentleman called Timothy Saunders, from the Facebook group of, I think it was the Spiral Dynamics group of Said Davlabani, told me, listen, by the ideas you are exposing here, I recommend you to take a look inside the book Feeling and Personhood by John Heron, 1992. And at first, I was reading the relevant chapter 10, I think, and I had a little shock because he was 10 years before me, and it's always a shock if you learn that someone has had your idea early on, and first you haven't done your homework. Second, it's always a risk of doing maculatura. I don't know if this exists in English, the word, which means you're writing something, so to speak, originally, and it's not original. Okay. What I love about John Heron is that John Heron had this idea of what he calls the one many, and he wasn't afraid to take on the postmodern usual stereotypes about the ultimate not being able to, that the ultimate cannot be a unity, okay, but only a plurality. So And also he wrote this book and had this idea in the early 90s when he was something like 72. So this alone is really a great feat. And he also does this in the context of in principle, this is a psychological book, a psychology book about personhood, about the aspects of personhood. And just in passing, he develops this metaphysics. And John Heron also has done something which I appreciate. Back in 2002, I think he had a little row with Ken Wilber about the attempt by Ken Wilber to back in 1997 or something to take over transpersonal psychology and take on the leadership in this movement, the psychological movement. And people like John Heron and Jorge Ferrer, who also contributes to the anthology, opposed to this attempt. And I think that's a good thing. I fully appreciate the merits of Ken Wilber, what he's done. He kicked off the whole, in a way, he kicked off the whole postmodern movement, which in transpersonal psychology, it's not yet fully developed, with Groff or also Maslow in the origin. But obviously, I love the idea. I love the fact that he, I developed the idea back in 2000, around 2000, and for 12 years I thought that maybe I'm the only one. I'm the fool who doesn't get that how foolish he is, And you tend to, when you're so alone, you tend to doubt yourself and not the others, if you're a reasonable person. And that's what I did. And then this means that coming to know John Heron and his work was a great relief for me, because this made me think that after all, this idea of mine might not be so absurd after all. Okay.
Beautiful. What was it? What attracts you to this idea so much? Obviously you feel there's something very important about thinking singularity and plurality together. You're excited by it. It was worth feeling that you might be a fool for many years on your own. What makes it so worth it? What's really important about this idea?
This is the idea is the solution, the attempt of a solution of problems I had with my worldview before, which was to reconcile the traditional, the modern, and the postmodern sensitivities and insights and values, and all of the modernism. Modernism is a pluralistic worldview, but in another sense than postmodern is pluralistic. They both lack, I think, the devotion or the appreciation of the unity of the cosmos. Modernism doesn't give a shit about the planet. It's not aware. It just tries to maximize profit and maximize fun but modernism has this merit of natural science. That is, we, for example, compared to ancient and medieval India, we have a lot of more understanding about the order of nature, biology, geology, psychology, economy, politics, and so on. The Indians were trying to somehow how should I say, to put them the plurality of beings and systems in the realm of the illusionary, the lila, for example, as they call it in Hinduism. And in Buddhism, it's even more salient. It's samsara, I think it's called. And you have this non-duality, and the idea in Buddhism of emptiness, which is to say the Nagarjuna approach that finally, ultimately, any pair of polar or opposing or not ambivalent but antagonistic poles are not part of the ultimate. And my idea was to make the opposite to this and say any duality, which arguably is ultimate, is part of the ultimate for real. It's not illusionary, but if we develop our judgment and our knowledge carefully, we will get to understand this web of coherent meaning of the universe. Of course, we're too tiny to get it right, but if a basic worldview notion is fundamental enough, then it is part of the ultimate, and that's the idea. In my view, there is no difference between the divine and the order of the cosmos, and so everything is really part, and there's not this illusion thing, which is even in Neoplatonism, you have the one in another sense, and the one transcends absolutely the multitude of beings, and the beings are, as of this gross structure and this dense structure of which is a bad thing. And in many one thinking, it's there's no bad things, there's the coherence and the meaning of the cosmos, and there's a multitude of beings and entities moving around in this cosmos in this order with a certain amount of autonomy, and a certain amount even of agency, which is withdrawing the power of the wholeness. That's the whole neck, so to speak, in this thinking. To give to really never to say this kind of worldview is completely wrong. There's something to the plurality. There's something to dualities. Which are complementing, and there's something to the overall unity. And all of this combines in this unity, duality, plurality, which is the many one. That's the idea. So it's in a sense it's an attempt to avoid all the isms that make it so difficult to not have ridiculous and childish antagonisms. I say there are tensions. There's always tension. There's always catastrophe, even. But even this makes sense. That's the basic idea. Okay.
Nice. So yeah,
Roughly.
so you've been working intellectually with this problem of how to reconcile these different worldviews that you're sympathetic to, as well as these different fundamental aspects of reality, the divine and the pluralistic nature of the manifest cosmos, and to treat both of them as really real and neither of them as illusory. But did you also have any sort of personal spiritual experiences or epiphanies that you felt like the many one was like the minimum framing to describe experiences that you were having about the world?
Yes, very much so. In fact, I started meditating around 1980, I think, at age 15 or 16. And for me, this quickly became very important, because I was living in a little village in rural Bavaria. I was coming up in a Catholic teacher family, which with many brothers and sisters, which was a good thing. But I didn't have, as a young boy, I didn't have the opportunities to develop, intellectually and see from the world as much as I would have liked to, except on television. So I was quite unhappy when I was a youth, and I also was quite tense and how should I say, tense and nervous person. I still am, but now I'm meditating for decades, and I started someday. I started with a very basic meditational practice, as I'm still doing today, which is basically sitting down or lying down and making this famous voyage in the body, inside the body, and not trying to stop doing anything with the body, and make it feel some way, but making the body feel like it is, like it wants to. And that's a very effective thing. If you make this do this regularly, you have, if you are lucky, maybe also you can have the most extraordinary revelations of I don't know, of luminosity, of also of love, I think, of a warmth or affection, which is coming from something beyond our daily life. And for me, even back then, I was already trying to read some philosophy, and interests in most humanities and natural sciences. I was in a grammar school where we had all the languages and the sciences and math and the humanities on the same footing. So I got a very broad education too. And for me, I also grew up inside with my brothers and sisters, who am the youngest. So they were all youth and young adults, and they were very much inside the postmodern alternative, what we call in Germany the alternative movement, which is ecological, and always jeans and sneakers. Never wear a tie. You never wear a jacket. Regular jacket. This is forbidden, and it's always in opposition to the square ideas and outfit of my parents. I think I never wore a suit in my life. Still now, to this date, and this is a very strong conditioning. I received, but also I was liking the inevitable young girls who studied social workers, and who studied psychology and so on. And I always had these problems with their relativistic and esoteric views, which were so like more, the multicolored supermarket of spiritualities, and the sheer disinterest in any bigger, scientific. For example, I once lived with a girl who didn't know about the structure of the universe, the galaxies. And this was not, this was somebody who had studied at a university. So you see, for me, this was very disappointing and unsatisfactory. And so I had a loyalty to the solidary and emancipatory concerns of this movement and ecological, and still have. But I also suffered very much from their ignorance. Can put it otherwise. If you had asked them, the one that they all knew was Paul Feyerabend and Paul Wacławski, who are relativistic thinkers, always proving that you can take the other side, and always deconstructing any attempt to get a bigger picture, not bothering about it, not being willing to go at the great lengths it means to achieve this, and maybe read a good newspaper for some years, which is necessary. So that's where I got my my melancholy and a feeling of alienation from my own crowd, alternative crowd, an ecological crowd. And this was going on later when I studied analytic philosophy in Munich at Munich University. I loved this very much, the intellectual rigor, but I really hated the materialism, because as a meditator, used to these feelings of immediate connection to something which is not dead, or something which has spirit, maybe which is the ultimate spirit. This was for me was ridiculous. And even what's worse, trying to deconstruct the idea of reflexive and responsible personhood, which is sawing the branch you're sitting on in a middle class society, democratic society. So I had this these very basic and meditational experiences without any of the usual Asian conceptual background. Even the typical Zen background, which tries to tell you that it's not a philosophy. That's, for me, is a very, very strong philosophy. But I had none of this. For me, it was all freelance meditation, and it still is. And for me, it's I always also had these funny experiences in nature, or listening to music, or being with very, very close friends of something divine manifesting. Nothing to do with the Catholic God of my Lord of my parents, but for me this is obvious, and still I don't know what this I think I know, but what I don't know is if this divine really cares for our thriving on Earth, as a civilization, or even passing this bottleneck we are dashing into. I don't know, and I'm afraid that this doesn't matter this much. But I get the feeling that there is no contradiction, between the philosophical visions. When I was a youth, I read a bit of Kant, a bit of Hegel, a bit of Nikolaus of Cusa, Leibniz, all the classics, and there was always a feeling each of them is getting at something absolutely crucial, and I can't understand why the others don't understand this. They even didn't understand their Foucault and their Deleuze. They didn't bother to read into their philosophers. And that, for me, is a total disgrace and disappointment. And for me, this usual anti-rationalism of postmodern esotericists and spiritual people is completely alien. So for me, the intellectual or the philosophical and the spiritual have to melt together, and that's the attempt that I make in my many one, or cosmicalism or holotheism, and also that's why for me this was a coming home. Philosophically, I had been searching for maybe 20 years or 25 years for the solution, and there one day it showed up, for me, and this is a very strong stance, also spiritual experience that I have.
You mentioned that you appreciated John Heron's resistance to Ken Wilber taking over the transpersonal movement. A lot of the contributors to this volume are associated with the integral theory movement in some way. What do you say to people who want to characterize this volume as being sort of just integral theory?
For long years, I've been guest and contributor in German integral Facebook groups, also the American ones and the British, they aren't any, the US American ones. And obviously, in the early 2010s, the Wilberian movement was still stronger. Even your great integral post metaphysical spirituality group was was much more active back then, and I get the impression that somehow the followership has dispersed, or I don't know, has not renewed itself with fresh young blood. On the contrary, by contrast, there are younger people around 40 or maybe early 30s to early 50s who have grown back, but who are not part of the cult, of the Ken Wilber cult, or of the real, followership in the classical sense. And I get the impression that Ken Wilber, even Hansi Freinacht, the Swedish meta-modern thinkers, are very indebted to Ken Wilber's work, and his merit is enormous in this respect. But somehow the movement has pettered out, has divided in more, for example, Bruce Alderman and yourself are carrying on everywhere in the North American field and scene and milieu, making contact with the academics, John Verweke and Henriquez and Zach Stein and so on, and also making friends with Brendan Dempsey and other people. And I'm very delighted, I've been delighted for a few years now, to watch all this. And there's obviously one of the last writings by Ken Wilber, which I think is an excerpt called Integral Semiotics. Okay, back in, I don't know, 2012 or something. I don't know, 2010 maybe. And there he very much takes a Nagarjunan approach to emptiness, and this is in a way this is exactly the opposite to the many one approach, because the Nagarjunan approach it's a neither nor approach, and the both and obviously is the opposite. In Nagarjuna it says neither the one nor the other, nor both, nor neither, nor both and neither, and so on. And obviously, in order to fix a problem which his own Buddhist fellow theologians had at the time, the 2nd century, I think, where you had those who thought that what's it called, the dharmas, the factors of existence, were eternal, and the others said they were non-existent, and they were just emerging and disappearing all at once. And Nagarjuna, I think he tried to take the wind out of the sails of both, and that's the I think the more narrow intention of his work, but some took it further to be a refutation of the ultimate having any qualities. Okay, being amorphous or being absolutely amorphous, formless. Okay, so Ken Wilber is always, for me, has always been someone who says, if you critique some extreme position you think he takes, he says, no, I'm also, appreciating the other side. But then in the end, he does not, I think. And I've been very inspired by his work, but I see that in a way I'm doing the opposite, also in the sense that for me, in my not in the anthology, in the anthology you have Oliver Griebel's cosmic holism a bit, but you also have Layman Pascal's metaphysics and theology of adjacency, which is a bit different. Layman Pascal is always saying the ultimate divinity is always only approximate or never quite completed, and it's also sort of a minimal divinity with guaranteeing certain logical and mathematical or maybe topological also consistencies, overall consistencies of the cosmos. But I think that Layman is would be skeptical about the divinity or the divine having the reflexivity, the self-awareness, which I would attribute to this cosmic coherence. So in the anthology, I would not I tried not to emphasize too much my own views, but to bring to the fore each of the contributors. That was the task, and that also I'm very much of a I believe very much in community work and networking. I think that with our postmodern scenes and bunch of milieus, we are living in a quite frightening diaspora. You're living inside of 99.9% of materialists and family people, innocent family people, but who are always trying to make ends meet and trying to the best for their children, but not having the time or not having the talent to try and get beyond late modernity, and there are maybe the postmodern milieus in Germany, maybe 10% of the population, which is immense. That's millions of people. And the postmodern people I know from our YouTube and Facebook scene, maybe 10,000 people worldwide. I don't know, 10,000, and the postmodernists 10 million alone in Germany alone. So you have a factor of 10 million, maybe percent of a percent. And so what I want to say is we would be wise to really join forces and not disperse our forces in a competition, or trying to be the better one or something. And that's why I made this book. But because I'm what makes it special is that I'm a German. I'm among the few who are not Americans, and so I'm an outsider. But even with my language, I'm not able to be witty and eloquent in English nearly as much as I could even in French, but I'm doing my best, and I think we depend on really each of us, joining forces for maybe a decade or two, not making friends, not fighting, but doing exactly what you and I am doing just now. One time I interview you, the next time you interview me, and we try to somehow get the attention of a broader public, which hopefully we may succeed in doing with the escalating climate crisis, for example. I hope so. I'm a bit desperate because downstairs I have two young sons, and they will get the full problems of climate catastrophe in the face when they will. When they will be 50, I better not think about it. What this will mean. I'm trying to make them as resilient and all the same, kind persons, but resilient and smart persons, so they can survive this and contribute to making it better. But currently, they're only interested in playing their computer games. So, yeah. Always the same problem. Everyone has the same problems, and that's how do we form, or how do we educate and like growing a garden? How do we grow our own public and audience? It's not there. We have to do our best, and maybe someday some thousands or 10,000s of people will come along, and and this will be the reap the harvest one day. But this is maybe in, I don't know, 20 years, 10 years. This will begin. Okay, this is I'm diverging.
That's good. In your opening remarks, so we're coming to Bruce Alderman's chapter now, I noticed that you said two things really stood out to you about his essay, his chapter, and that one was sort of social, that it was a look at how do different spiritual and religious communities and perspectives relate to each other, and the idea that it's certainly possible that each of them can integrate or include the other ones and understand the other ones as also integrating and including them in a way that's sort of mutual and fair. And then the other part that you single out in that opening remark about Bruce is this notion, is the conceptual notion that um, whatever the reality is, it can't be grasped by the concepts completely. That the whatever we mean by the one withdraws even from the notion of the one, trying to include them all. And that feels paradoxical in some ways. What do you feel like? What's the connection between the conceptual and the cultural or ethical position that Bruce is arguing for in that essay?
The traditional approach would be some kind of relativism, which means that we just don't have the right concepts, and we are not able to form them either, because we're too perspectival. And to an extent, that's true. There has to be, in my opinion, there has to be progress, in philosophy or in worldview. I think even compared to Jesus of Nazareth or Buddha, we definitely have made much progress, in terms of science and also humanities, and also civilization, democracy and rule of law and social state and so on. But the problem is we have this. It's like in panentheism. We are embedded inside the divine, but it also pervades us completely, and there's also the divine inside of us. It's not only we inside the divine. So in a sense, we have we are all in any religion, even the devil worshippers are trying to worship the same divine, but they all have their psychological problems. They all have their problems of violence and domination, and abuse, and self-depreciation. So all this will reflect in the God view they will have. Nevertheless, I think that we can grasp something about the divine. We just can't, we can't. We are postmodern. We are postmodern. That is, we have to celebrate and appreciate the plurality of approaches. And for me, the champion of this is Bruce Alderman, in a way, with his idea of a co-presence, a mutual inclusion. For example, in the classical situation with Edgar Morin and Ken Wilber, and who was the third? This was critical realism of what's his name? Pascal. So he says, in some sense, Wilber is included in Morin, but Morin is also included in Wilber, and that's a very fruitful and good idea, and very kind idea also. And I think that's very important, that we stop to divide in the little force, the fortresses. And there's the other fortress, and they exchanging the blows, and that's another that's from a different age, even the skirmishes between Wilber and Beck and Cohen, the spiral dynamics guys. It was classical, for the last symptoms of a sickness we have to overcome, I think. So. Yes, we have this problem. We cannot, I also, for me, for some people, the feeling of emptiness of this vast, this vast space in meditation means that that the divine cannot be a mind, some kind of divine mind. And I can't, and I don't want to persuade them otherwise. But it's the feeling they get in meditation. For me, it's this feeling of vastness and luminosity, and the silence is more about the say emotional life of the divine. It doesn't contradict the possibility that the mind is that the divine is also grasping its own coherence, and understanding what it is. That is the cosmic coherence. But I can't, and I don't want to persuade people about my view. Steve McIntosh, who also contributed in this, in his book Presence of the Infinite, I think 2014 or something, or 15, he does exactly this in one chapter, and that's why I choose him too for the anthology, and that's the inevitable state of affairs in a postmodern scene, and the problem is normally, in the pre-modern era, and even in the modern era, with for example, in France, you have a politician, and he gathers around him a party, but it's not a party around an idea or a program, but pretty much around a person. And that's why the French are not able to make coalitions, because it's always these stallions, trying to, and but with this approach, even with Ken Wilber, he was able of taking this star status, taking star status on, and gathering people around him. And I think now we have transcended or overcome even this star problem and big man problem. The problem that comes with overcoming the problem is that how do we gather people around us? If you don't have the stars, the star authors or the handsome guy and the charismatic guy, how do you gather people around just with ideas and just with a plural discourse, between maybe 100 people who are productive and creative in this to this extent, like yourself. Okay, does this answer the question?
Yes.
A bit.
Another chapter is Philip Clayton's essay on spiritual evolution and organic participation. And it's a very interesting one to me because he's arguing that there's a kind of a bad theology, which has a concept of a God that's closed and already completed. It's sort of shut off to change and shut off to the manyness. And that having a theology like that makes us fundamentally unable as a civilization to resolve our ongoing ecological problems and change the way we relate to natural systems. How would you characterize Philip's position? Why is it that a one without the many gives us a situation where we can't really solve our ecological crises?
Okay, the problem of a progressive theologian like Philip Clayton is always the non-progressive theologians and believers. For me as a German, it's completely far away and foreign. The North American situation with this many fundamentalists. Even whole states of the US dominated by these people. And but that's the situation for someone like you, maybe even to a lesser extent because you're a Canadian. But for Philip Clayton, this is a crucial and vital problem, politically and ecologically. So he will always try to find to make progress in terms of God view, and the progress is that. Or the problem is that, which I think is really a problem, because at one point, many of the fundamentalists and the traditional believers in the US and in Canada will say, oh, well, yes, there's a climate crisis, but either God will fix it and has already planned so, or he will let us perish and has also already planned so. So, therefore, it doesn't matter what we do. Therefore, we won't do anything and just keep on keeping on, And Philip is a person who says God has not a ready-made plan for this planet, but he needs our engagement. He needs our engagement in order to save this civilization, which is a bit, of course, at odds with the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, because in the Bible, in the New Testament, there are many passages where Jesus says he will come back, and fix the whole thing. And that's a problem. If he will fix it anyway, why should we bother to do anything if it's just costing our money, our hard-earned money, and take away this from the education of our kids and so on. But for Philip, I think he has the problem of many progressive theologians, Christian theologians, that he comes from this tradition, but he says things which are not necessarily compatible, consistent with literal remarks by Jesus of Nazareth. So, but nevertheless, Philip Clayton is someone who, for years, he tried. He went oftentimes. He went to China, trying to practically convince the elites in China to change their ways and their views about the climate crisis. And he's president of ECOSIF, of the institution ECOSIF, and he told me some years ago. He told me that he has basically his main concern now is ecological engagement and activism, and not a Christian theology anymore. But he wrote, this is an original contribution, and Philip is you have to know him. For example, there's a well-known American science, a popular science series, and he was in the episode about emergence, and definitely, you see him, you feel the charisma, and how smart he is, and how great he is. This is, by the way, I have here something from him, Mind and Emergence, classic. I recommend this very much. Also to Graham Dempsey, Brendan Dempsey, should he watch this? It's really a classic. So that's in sum, you can say, all in all, God needs us to save this civilization. Otherwise, it will perish. And how to reconcile this with the guarantee of salvation, I don't know, but maybe we can ask him one day in a talk.
What else is in here? Jorge Ferrer's section. Now, Jorge's famous for his work on participatory spirituality, and he talks a lot in this paper, as he usually does, about the way that we participate and enact a multiple set of ultimates that might not be the same as each other. Now, what is your sense of what he thinks unifies all the different ultimates? What is the unity of the different ultimates that we can enact?
Okay, in his work, Jorge is always speaking about the cosmos or life, or a third thing I forget right now, and I think it's this simple, for him. For me, Jorge is the one who tries to keep it as postmodern as possible, to really safeguard this pluralism, a quite radical pluralism of worldviews, and also the idea of participation. You not only participate to your world, to your cosmos, you also co-enact and it in a way. And I am doing so too, but in another way. And that's why, in order to make this consistent among the different ultimates, co-enacted ultimates, to make them consistent among each other, the ultimate, the one, has to be very indeterminate, very flu, very rough, very rough. And I'm not sure what if there remains anything ultimately, but it has to, because he wants also, he thinks that the ultimate needs unity in order to keep the community of persons together also. So I think he did a great job in trying to preserve as much of postmodern sensitivities as possible. And but there are problems, because if I am in my own universe, in my own cosmos, with a pantheon, with for example the Greek pantheon, and you are living in a modern worldview without any gods, why don't you see my Greek gods? There should be some empirical problems, to put it mildly, and I don't see at all how he fixes this. If you're only talking about salvation, you can say, okay, after death, everyone will experience his own afterlife, but after all, we all live together on this planet, and where are your divinities? And elementaries and so on. I don't see them, but I should, because or shouldn't I? And that's really a problem I see. But still, Jorge, I think he stopped working at CIIS, a few years ago, and came back to Europe, and now he lives on the island of Ibiza. The famous party and vacation island of Ibiza, doing workshops about polyamory and the realization and of your sexuality and your friendship with people and partnership. And I have the sense, and he's a very kind person who gave the book much time, in order to work two chapters of his book together. I'll show you its Participation in the Mystery. That's also a collection of papers. And I said, can you put two of them a bit together, in order to get an overview? Of course, I will do it. And he's a great personality. He is somehow a bit the disciple of John Heron and continuator. And now I don't know what remains of a participatory spirituality, but what I loved about it in both Heron's and Ferrer's reading is the complementarity of participation and individuation. The idea that you cannot get rid of your personality and your individuality in order to realize yourself spiritually, but on the contrary, you will be able to realize yourself spiritually better the more you are individuating, a bit in the sense of C.G. Jung, Carl Jung. Carl Jung is an influence in the transpersonal psychology. So this is this dichotomy and this two sides of the coin, being participation and individuation. That's very important to me, and I love this very much with both of them.
Tilmann Haberer's chapter is, I think, an important one, because one of the things he does is look back, and not many of these chapters look back to find versions of the many one, in his case, within Christian dogmas of the past. How important do you think it is, in terms of many one theology having an impact on the future, for it to feel like it has a past, that it's not some new thing just emerging now, but that it has a history and a kind of a culture to itself that's bubbled up in historical mysticism and theology all along?
Okay. That's difficult. I think there are the book by Tilmann Haberer, a German book, God 9.0, which means God 9.0. It's a long seller and bestseller in Germany, and there he develops the idea of, in principle, it should be called Jesus 9.0, because he tries to set out, the different Jesuses who come along with the stages of evolution, of civilizational evolution and cultural evolution. And so he shows that there is a Jesus for everyone, There's a modern, pre-modern Jesus, a modern Jesus, and a postmodern Jesus, and also a post-postmodern, an integral Jesus. And I believe that, in fact, even if the integral age was a bit, maybe beginning with I would even say with Clare Graves, Clare Graves and Victor Abraham Maslow around 1970, and still there always are precursors, and not precursors from 100 years ago, but from thousands of years ago, partly. And Jesus himself, it's hard to say, because Jesus is not the person who wrote the Testaments, I suppose. And I suppose that John the evangelist and Paul of Tarsus, they both had their own agenda, which they got into and it's hard to tell it apart, very difficult. But Jesus seems to I know it in French but not in English, to be very apt, very friendly, to be incorporated or appropriated by any level of civilization and spiritual evolution. For example, also integral, and for Tilmann Haberer, he's there are the two dogmas of the Council of Chalcedon, I think, and Nicaea. What's it in English? Nicaea or Nicaea?
Nicaea.
And they have the Christological dogma and the Trinitarian dogma. And these were the so-called church fathers, Christian bishops and theologians, or philosophers, one should say, who tried to make get together Greek philosophy and Jesus' teaching from the New Testament. Greek philosophy also delineates from the Neoplatonism and other things, because in Neoplatonism, for example, you have this idea of a messenger, of the one coming down and saving us from the gross matter of the world and so on. And for the church fathers, the one teaching was that Jesus is all human and all God, totally, entirely God and entirely human, which of course is paradox. But it's necessary not to, for them, it was necessary not to get too strong a division, a cut or a break between a crack between the spiritual and the material world. And Tilmann is reinterpreting these dogmas and says, in fact, Jesus was not the only Son of God in the strong sense Christianity is founded upon, ultimately, but he was just the first person who showed us so vividly that it was not necessary to be afraid, that we were already saved. And this is true for Tilmann Haberer. This is true of of Jesus, and also for you and me. I think it's an experience that Layman. In meditation, you sometimes get the feeling, okay, whatever happens to me, ultimately everything is all right. Even as bad as it can get, I can always even if I, end in agony, even this is, in a sense, is all right, and likely this will happen to many of us. But for Tilmann Haberer, this was the achievement of Jesus of Nazareth. He who became aware that we are already saved right now. Everyone will be saved, and if other people manage to imitate or to incorporate this attitude and this experience, they get salvation in this sense. That's the Tilmann Haberer take on the Christological dogma. Trinitarian is a little more tricky, but of course you have to presuppose that the church fathers likely didn't have these intentions in mind when they wrote this or made this. There were also, there were always also power things. Constantine, the Emperor Constantine, and was fighting against the Arians, who said that Jesus was a human. And these were the political enemies of Constantine, the emperor, and that's But for Tilmann Haberer, there seems to be some kind of like with Hegel, the trick of the ruse of history. You don't want it. Napoleon didn't want to get the Code Civil, the rule of law across Europe, but that's what he did against his intention, and likewise, maybe that's true with the church fathers, according to Tilmann.
I like that. I've always been very interested they left many gospels out of the formal version of the Bible, but the fact that they included 4 of them is very interesting. It's hard to think of another religious system that allows for 4 different versions of the story of the one. So that's fascinating to me. We're coming to John Heron's chapter. Now, we talked a little bit about John already. And I think in your opening remarks, you kind of contrast him to the conventional view of Nagarjuna as a person who's sort of saying that there are things we can say about a structure that is unity, duality, and plurality all at the same time, rather than simply saying there's nothing that can be spoken about this and we can only access it through meditation. But it struck me that as you were saying, your introduction to John Heron's work was through a book on psychology. And I'm curious how you think about the kind of relationship to our mind that we have to have. If our notion of reality and of the divine is going to be a many one, does that require us to have a many one experience of ourselves as well in order to make that real for us?
Yes. Partly that's the transpersonal heritage, coming from Abraham Maslow. Abraham around 1970, I think he died quickly after this. He made this important step, where he originally he was along with what's his name, the famous system the famous humanistic psychologist. There's Maslow, and there's the second one, but the important step was to really overcome the so-called so-called behaviorism, because they Maslow and the other one, I'm sorry, they realized you can't do psychology without taking this person seriously as a person, talking about its views, talking about its perceptions, its problems, their pain, their problems, their situation. Everything behaviorism does not. And Maslow originally developed his pyramid of the needs. And at some point in the late 60s, he came to the conclusion that there was a further a further layer needed, which was transcendence, transcending the person. And for John Heron, it comes pretty much from this. Of course, he was born in 1926 or something. So when Maslow died, he was already 45 or something. So John Heron comes from this, and for John Heron, it is unthinkable that the individual, which is called by the world to individuate, should be dissolved in the course of the spiritual evolution. So he's very much pretty much anti Ken Wilber also, even in this book Feeling and Personhood. And he says in his view, it's the mystery. The mystery is even when you get a really thorough attunement to the divine, you still mysteriously are preserved as an individual, as precisely this and not any other individual, and that's a great mystery for him. And that's a part of the one many idea. There's no dissolution, but the path goes on. Even when you are beyond the point where you realize the world is not turning around you, the world is all right before I was, after I'm gone, and even when I'm suffering. And that's John Heron's big point, and he's doing. For me, he's important because he. The South Asian spiritualities, the Buddhist and the Hinduist, are in a way are the holy scriptures of postmodern spiritualities, both of them. And John Heron points out he doesn't have this philosophization, so to speak, philosophical socialization any postmodern person has received, which grew up in the 60s or later. He grew up in the 40s, and he doesn't have this loyalty or formative experience with Hindu and Buddhist teachings. So for him, it's important to say yes. The South Asian spiritualities are very important, but they are limits. Don't let yourself be told that you have to destroy your personhood, your individuality. That's very important in his work, and that's about what I love about him. There's as I told you before, my meditative socialization, was not with any special teachings. I was reading quite a lot of Vivekananda back then, the great Hindu thinker, Advaita Vedanta thinker. But for me, this is not, something I, so to speak, have to smuggle into my meditative practice and afterwards pretend there is no philosophical background. Theological background. There always is, almost, okay? And even for me, but I had in my view, I had the chance to not to be, coming through these narrow channels, for that, there's an affinity with John Heron in this regard. Also Jorge Ferrer, by the way.
Steve McIntosh's chapter is sort of a plea for a non-dual mysticism that doesn't just become satisfied with formlessness, but also allows for there to be, and this is a great phrase, a not less than personal relationship between the individual and the ultimate. Now, that's sort of the question of how those things are related runs throughout this entire book, right? Between a kind of classical mystical relationship between the personal depths of the self and a sense that the divine is personal, and this other experience that what we've been calling the divine is sort of the homogeneous expanse of reality in an impersonal sense. Now, when you read Steve's work, do you get the sense that what he's saying is that this not less than personal relationship is superior to experiencing it as formlessness, or that he's saying there's options, you can experience it either way?
Okay, I mean, Steve McIntosh is not a Christian, but he's a Christian-inspired spiritual person, and for him, the feeling to be loved by God personally, and feel this love is crucial. So for him, this is formative. For him, it's clear that God is personally loving me, Steve, and you, Layman, as well, and you, Oliver, as well as anyone else. And this is not, of course, is not consistent with God being absolutely formless. For example, a Zen friend of mine, German Zen friend of mine, always told me that he had learned with a Zen teacher, with a Japanese Zen teacher, who one day asked them, what did they think, which quality the divine had? And my friend said, love. And the teacher said, no. And there's all in this answer is all the really is all the crack, inside. There then what Steve calls the non-dualists and the panentheists on the other side, for whom it's clear that God has also, which is philosophically difficult, that God has an emotional life. How can the cosmos have emotions? That's not trivial at all. But there's no way around it. I think if you and that's a basic option and decision to be made. Do I feel God as a loving, not less as than a person, or do I feel the divine or divinity as something which is for all its vastness and all its luminosity and all its serenity, does not have this reflexive, and intentionality characteristics which are typical for a person or not less than a person. That's the big question. And of course, what I appreciate about Steve, he says there's no mystery. I don't pretend that I don't opt for the more than personal option, but I invite my non-dualist friends to try and be open for this, this love of God. And but he also says that maybe future evolution of our God view may lead to a synthesis between the both, because obviously for me, obviously the postmodernists adopted the formless, the emptiness God because they hated authority so much, so whenever you have God attribute any personal traits to him, there's always the Father, the Lord lurking behind, and that's what we want to avoid at all costs. So and I don't think we have I don't think we have overcome this. We are still in the phase of a postmodern, very much milieus very much influenced and formed by this postmodern anti-authoritarian allergies and reflexes. And maybe once these people will have aged and new people will have grown up who don't have these problems anymore, then maybe we'll be able to come back to celebrate the motherly and fatherly side of the divine, which doesn't help us solve the riddle of the cruelty of the world. That's still the main question. How can a loving parent, do this to us? Okay, but that's Steve.
Well, the next section in the book is my section. And I notice you refer to me as the youngest contributor. And then, so the youngest contributor still has a gray beard. And it makes me curious what a teenager or a 25-year-old would think about any of these things going forward. It's very hard for me to formulate a question about my own section. So I just would invite you to characterize me and what I've said.
Gladly. Layman Pascal. Firstly, Layman is the only contributor who was born after the authoritarian age, after the last, the remnant in the 50s and 60s. I was still raised in this with these problems, and you're even with your parents being postmodernists themselves, in the remote island behind Vancouver Island or some. You had and I think this explains your character and your philosophy a bit, that you have been spared from quite a few influences which would have prevented you from becoming who you are. What's interesting about Layman 2 is that he comes from Ken Wilber's integral camp, I should say. Originally, likewise, Bruce Alderman. And that's a legacy still, obviously. And I appreciate very much their loyalty in a way to their elder, Ken Wilber. There's a funny interview of theirs, YouTube interview of theirs with Ken at one point, with Layman putting on a wig, a blue wig, I think, and Ken Wilber didn't really know what to do about it and started to call you another name, but in any case, that's really not important. No, it's also important. What's important about your thinking is that you, other than Bruce Alderman, who scoops much from other thinkers, European thinkers often, you're really doing something novel, or something really original, which is the metaphysics of adjacency. And this, I appreciated your contribution also because firstly, it was written especially for this volume, and second, you will really try to get into the problematic of the many one, and it's complex at times, but I think for you, and this reminds me a bit of Jorge Ferrer, the divinity withdraws to any definite account, because we are only. We are always only approximating its essence, and second, we are also contributing to its essence. Historically, it's in process theology, there are two phases of gods: the antecedent God and the consequent God. And the consequent God is the God that learns and accompanies history, learns from people, learns from humans, and accompanies the history of mankind and all the other species there may be in the universe. So I think for Layman, it's important to account for the historical and for the accompanying character of the divine. He's always with us and not somewhere beyond, ready-made, And what's interesting is also I think that Layman is still struggling with the question: how much is he willing to attribute? How much personhood or essence is eternal traits is he willing to attribute to this divinity? And sometimes he says it's just the logical, the basic logical, the order of the things has to obey certain basic logical operations, and maybe if you go up a mountain somewhere, you have to go down, something like that. And there's a long passage where he tries to he distinguishes three aspects of the question: how what the one is in the many one, and I'm not able to extemporate on this right now, but I vividly recommend the book, it's the chapter of, and I also think that the idea of the same difference, is something like, in the title of the anthology, there is not only one many, there's also both and. And the both and is also always the admonition: don't look for the antagonistic, always look for the complementarity. And the same difference is a complementarity of seemingly opposite poles. And really, there's never same without difference, and never difference without the same being the same somehow. And that's exactly what's called adjacency, I think. So I'm looking forward to witnessing the further philosophical evolution of this young, promising trickster philosopher called Layman Pascal. And so now let's go on with the discussion of the anthology.
Yes, who's next? Elizabeth Debold and Thomas Steininger. And their article is interestingly about emergent dialogue and we space and intersubjectivity. It reminds me of this phrase that's been popular for a few years, that the next Buddha will be the Sangha, right? What's your take on the idea that, because this is a very intersubjective project you're looking at, right? You're looking at a kind of a theological shift that welcomes not only the concept of a many one, but many different experiences of the one and many different experiences of the experience of the one and the many. And you've brought many people together to try to collaborate in thinking through this. So it seems like you're very focused on mutuality and intersubjectivity. Do you see the we as having a special role in figuring out the theology and even perhaps the enacted religion of tomorrow? Is it something individuals can do, or is the shared intersubjective space like a privileged mediator between the human and the divine?
Both and, I think. In the postmodernist milieu I grew up in, one problem was that virtually everyone was saying the same thing, and very, the so-called uniform nonconformism. And but we have to transcend this uniformity, and individuate, and necessarily, as some historians said one time about Julius Caesar, he was a very very much a impersonation of something eternal, not necessarily good, but eternal. But he also was a most personal, a most idiosyncratic person. So he reunited the universal with the very universal and very personal. So this is true, I think, for all great thinkers. Not great in the sense I'm the greatest, but obviously there are people who are more creative or more educated and more original than others. It's a taboo to say this, but that's the state of affairs. And but what we know now in the postmodern age is that we are not able to do it alone. We are not in the position, for example, of Kierkegaard or Nietzsche, who were opposing a whole bourgeois milieu they were coming from, and really take up this one-man fight. On the contrary, I think that this postmodern or integral or metamodern broader movement will rise or fall with the sangha, with the community of thinkers and public. In the very much in the spirit also of John Vervaeke, his dialogos, and I hope very much that we will continue to be able to cultivate this. For me, for example, it's a wonder you are sitting somewhere around the Huron Sea or Huron Lake, or I don't know, on the Great Lakes of Canada and US, and I'm sitting in south of Germany, and we are sharing this. Obviously, if we meet one day at Brandon's farm, it's a very different, but it's possible, it's even possible to unite across the Atlantic. And for me, a personal sorrow of mine is that there's so little coming from Europe right now, because I think that European virtues would do good to North American thinking. Even in our broader scenes. Yes, Thomas Steininger and Elizabeth Debold are very important in the German spiritual scene, both as podcasters and making a magazine. Unfortunately, this scene is very, very little. Like everywhere, is not very open for more philosophical and more intellectual and more education-wise and world knowledge concerns, and more on pretty much postmodern projects, and the people making seminars and people teaching practice and so on. And it's difficult to get into the more theoretical and more philosophical domains. And Elizabeth Debold, she's an American, is by the way, she's the only woman in this elect circle. And I would have loved to have more of them. Maybe one day we can make something with more women. By the way, there's also an anthology where there are more women, with yourself also contributing. And by the way, this is the one only British thinker, Jonathan Rosen, which is so active in Europe. There's Jonathan Rosen, there is Hansi Freinacht, and there's Lene Andersen, and that's it. That's about it in Europe, and that's a really frightening state of affairs. But there's also Thomas Steininger and Elizabeth Debold. the funny thing is that they told me they don't use the terminology anymore. The higher we and the dialogue, emergent dialogue, because at the time they were disciples of the famous Andrew Cohen, the spiritual teacher, and they managed to have some. They call them uncanny experiences, where they had the experience that people were speaking things that the other was thinking or thought and which they didn't think they had access to or came from themselves. And this was really for them a spiritual experience, that the dialogical setting has a life of its own, can take on a life of its own if you are open and really attentive to the others. And but I think, and I also had them in the anthology because I thought it was a good thing to have someone from Europe, and not only the North Americans. Ferrer, he was teaching at the CIIS, but Elizabeth and Thomas are living in Frankfurt, in Germany. So that was a point for me why I invited them, and also because they had this. What was very interesting is they had this collective approach, and at different passages in their paper, all at once they are collaborators of theirs saying something, in a citation, but it's not a quote from another academic. It's a quote from someone who is part of my group, and this is not usual for an academic paper or something. Normally, you have to quote them from a book or from personal message, or however you call it in English, and this is innovative. A friend of mine is saying, and then there's a passage about how they experience the higher we. That's really that intrigued me, and unfortunately, they don't use the terminology anymore. But I do think that that we can, if we are open to it, we can contribute to a common dialogus, which will befruchten, fertilize each of us, and give us aspects and perspective we hadn't before. But this is I think is obvious in our circles to have this insight too.
Well, that brings us at last to Oliver Griebel. And he's contributed an interesting piece on kind of the many-one relationship to natural philosophy and the natural sciences, which is very resonant with the work that Vervaeke and Henriques have been doing recently on a non-reductive natural science. And of course, when we put information into the mix of the natural sciences, we can go very deep and very philosophical. I'm curious whether you feel like the resolution to the conundrums that we're all looking at require us to move away from materialism, or to go deeper into materialism and discover the profundity of its depths.
First of all, I did this anthology in English because I wanted to write a new book. In fact, but I told myself I have made this anthology in German, 2019, I think. Wir Vielen in dieser einen Welt, which means the many of us in this one world. And then I thought this book is too good to let it to not offer it to the North Americans too, and the Anglophones. And so I didn't change a great deal about the lineup, except I invited Layman Pascal to the lineup, to the group, and then but then I was lucky because a student, a former student of Philip Clayton's, Andrew Davies, I had known him through Philip Clayton years ago, but then I had the idea I will not publish this on demand, book on demand, but I will ask Andrew Davies if he has an idea. And by pure chance, he happens to be a person who makes a series, perspective in process studies in the Whip and Stock Cascade Books series. By the way, have you received the book?
No, but they assure me that it's on its way any day now.
Okay. The book has been out since May, I think. Okay. This being said, was lucky to have Andrew Davies. This book is not process studies, but it's in the series of which is not so bad after all. And what was the question? The naturalism and materialism. Okay. Well, okay, but I wanted to have this published in the Anglosphere in order to write a new book, maybe calling it Both Many and One, with a white cover and the blue splash, and with both with two main concerns. First, overcome the remnants of postmodern reflexes, anti-reflexes, and allergies, and also entitlements. And second, really do some serious natural philosophy work in order to make modern science holistic, holistic and processual. Of course, there are people like Alicia Huerero and Stuart Kaufman and Terence Deacon and Ilya Prigozhin, of course, and a fellow Bavarian of mine, Alexander Unziker, a lateral thinker who defies the Higgs boson and all this American particle hunting, and tries to make a sense of, for example, of gravity and inertia in another holistic way, saying that the gravity is not caused by some fancy Higgs particle, otherwise doesn't appear. But here we postulate it in order to make sense of something. But he tries to construct a theory, which is very tricky, by the way, mathematically, as a theory which derives, which explains inertia, so the resistance to be moved away, even in outer space. Explain it by the influence of the whole cosmos, the retaining force which withstands to something changing its shape or moving or rotating, getting in rotation. So that's the whole other approach, and this is definitely postmodern natural science. If one manages to implement or to make some theory like this consistent and coherent, then this will be a really substantial challenge to the materialistic particle thinking. Yeah? We don't want a particle thinking; we want a participation thinking, which is the whole opposite. And there are, for example, Ilya Prigozhin. He was a biochemist, I think, and he at one point he got the Nobel Prize, and then he began to deliver a whole new mathematics to replace the particle thinking by some resonance thinking, where you don't have little beats at the lowest level, but you have some kind of a fluctuation zone, and the measurements force as the points of this soup or this turbulence to become concrete. And but in fact, the dynamics are more of a statistical a consequence of statistical happenings than collisions of billiard balls or like beads in empty spaces. That's a different approach, and this was completely hushed up by the physicists community back in the late 80s and early 90s, I think. And there's and then they come up with the so-called decoherence, which arguably is a sleight of hand, for reasons I cannot set out here. But there's really lots of work to do in order to reappreciate the work of the great Kaufmann and Deacon and Prigogine and some others, Herrero, with the book about the constraints, the formal causes in a way, but in a science manner, not in a esoteric manner. And so for me, there's the challenge for the postmodernly formed public is to incite them to finally get the education they would need to understand, the continental drift and the cosmos and the outer space, what's going on in the outer space, the evolution, all that's big history. Okay. Also the what's happened in the Bronze Age in Europe and globally, the evolution of mankind, and these classically postmodernist circles and milieus have not been willing to educate themselves. These are very talkative milieus, and they are not very much into sitting down and reading books, So I hope we managed to somehow, get the best of all worlds together, the eco solidary and emancipatory concerns and the education, the science and humanities background, get away from the history, from the hysteria and from the dogmatism and build something new out of this too, and also appreciate, the family people in rural regions who do the work with raising their children and making ends meet. So but we have this huge problem that humankind is pretty much a species which are strong with strong not separations, even what was it called in South Africa, the apartheid, the separation of ethnicities, the separations of worldviews. My father-in-law, he was a Protestant father-in-law. Now, some years ago, he still was laughing about the jokes he made about Catholic pastors. That was for him funny. So they had this formative influence of Catholicism versus Protestantism in Germany, 1950 Germany, not in the Middle Ages. So you see, humankind is really has some quite childish and stupid sides to it, and I don't know what we can do about it. But we will have to try to get over these, these one-sidednesses and this chauvinisms, and these isms, tout court, all this versus thinking, and we're working on it. What more can I say? And the taking seriously natural sciences, and not only but also empirical sciences altogether, will be crucial for the and no problem with shamans, shamanic things, and you're a person. What's very intriguing with you is that you're so versatile. And I love it. I love it. I love this whole scene, and I hope we can make something together. Maybe next time, sometime soon, I will talk another time with Matt Siegel, I think, about his Christianism, and I'm very happy. I don't care about the sales of my book. I care about the community, and I have the opportunity to talk with you, to talk with Matt, maybe some other people, and that's how we try to make progress beyond postmodernism, and that's it. You're part of it. Yeah, I hope that more of it will come from Europe in the future, and not always US, Canada, US, Canada, US, and so on. But we'll see.
Yeah, if it could be a little bit more European, a little bit more international, a little bit more female, there's lots of ways we could make this a richer experience. I've
Yes,
had a great deal of fun today exploring these different things. Each of them is so rich. If we actually started to get into any one piece of this, it would overwhelm the
yes.
entire discussion, which is already
Ah,
2 hours long.
yes, the
But
variable speed of
I
light,
want to say, very happy to contribute to this volume. Very, very inspired and resonant with the same community that you're working with. And I think that this idea of overcoming the fundamental antagonism between basic ontological opposites, such as many in the one, that's necessary in our thinking, and it's necessary in our hearts, and it's necessary socially. And if we can't, because these opposite sides are part of reality. You can't have reality where you're choosing between the two of them, or where one of them is real and the other one is non-existent or an illusion. We have to
yes,
validate it in order to heal ourselves collectively. So whatever comes of the future, I don't think it can heal itself without overcoming the divide that this book is trying to overcome. So I think of it as a real service that you've done here to try to put this anthology together. Thank you, Oliver.
thanks. Okay. Well, Layman, I already said various things about you. I hope, yes, I hope one day we'll maybe even this year we can make something with several authors, maybe 5 or 6, Steve McIntosh, yourself, Bruce Alderman. I would love to have Bruce Alderman talking about his the withdrawal of the individual from the order of things. And this is a great idea which influenced me when I was making this book, and also his idea of co-presence and so on. I think he should finally write a book about it, and make some kind of synopsis of his views. But maybe we sometime we can walk. Walk. Maybe we can walk. Sometimes I will come maybe to America. I have the flight shame. I'm ashamed of flying in the climate crisis. But maybe I will overcome this for one time in order to meet you. And thanks for having me. And have you're traveling again next day.
Yes,
Where are you going?
I'm going down to Brendan's farm to run the
Ah,
Metamodern Spirituality Lab.
give my compliments to him
I will.
and to
I'm looking
Bruce.
forward to talking to you, looking forward to seeing you, and looking forward to collaborating with you on whatever project is next. And I will
Okay,
pass your love on to Brendan and Bruce and everyone else.
thanks. See you.